first thing, or one of the main things that we will be asked about by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be our prayer. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he teaches us, الْعَهْدُ الَّذِي بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَ الْكُفَّارِ الصَّلَاةِ. The covenant, what makes us different from non-Muslims is the connection we have to Allah Azza wa Jal through as-salah, through prayer. And so, our children, they might be going to school, but that does not absolve them from the obligation of prayer. Our children, they go to school, but that does not absolve them from the obligation of salah. So on Jumu'ah, the children are not absolved from praying Jumu'ah. They have to either make an effort to somehow pray at the school themselves by having a request to the school board, and most times they give you permission because it is a religious obligation. I used to go when I was a high school student myself and give khutbahs at the local high school. Even in middle school, we would have a khutbah. Even in middle school, we're talking about 6th graders, 7th graders gathering together to pray Jumu'ah, right? Because at that point, the child is baligh. So the boys, they need to establish Jumu'ah Salah at their schools. So ask yourself, are the children that you know, are they praying Jumu'ah? Aside from Yawm al-Jumu'ah, and if they cannot pray Jumu'ah in congregation at the school because they're prevented from doing so, you still have to bring them to Jumu'ah. And let me tell you this, people, they're afraid that if my child misses 1 period, 2 periods, khalas, his future is over. I promise you that even Harvard and Stanford wouldn't deny your children access because they missed a period or 2 for Jumu'ah Salah. I'm telling you, that's not how it works. That's not how the school system works. So let's not use Jumu'ah, or let's not use school as an excuse, because it is not a legal Shar'i excuse. There are legal Shar'i excuses for missing Jumu'ah. For example, I'm not able to walk to the masjid by myself. Who's going to take me there? At that point, I pray Dhuhr, but I still have to pray. So on Jumu'ah, make sure that your children are praying Jumu'ah, and at the rest of the week, Monday through Thursday, are they praying Dhuhr at school? Because many times, Salatul Dhuhr comes in time of school. Are they praying Dhuhr at school? Are our children fearful of praying Salat al-Dhuhr in front of people at their school? They should not have any sort of fear or khawf in their hearts, because they should represent their Islam with full yaqeen and full conviction and pride, because they're following the truth and they're worshipping Allah Azza wa Jal. And the Prophet ﷺ, and I'll end that first note, he says that whoever misses 3 Jumu'ahs, this is mentioned in many of the books of hadith, Rawah al-Khamsa wa Musnad Imam Ahmad, that whosoever misses 3 Jumu'ahs, whosoever misses 3, for no reason, again for no legal, Shar'i reason, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place a seal on their hearts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will place a seal on their hearts, make it hard and black. And then you will be wondering, what happened to my children? It was you, it was your tarbiyah. Do you tell your children to pray Salatul Jumu'ah? Number 2, the second point that I wanted to mention is that our children, we need to make sure that the company that they're keeping is good company. The company that our children are keeping is good company. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, "Al-mar'u ala dini khalilih, falyanzur ahadukum man yukhalil." A person is on the religion of his close friend. And so one of you should look to whom he takes his close friend. And a poet, he says, وَاخْتَرْ قَرِينَكَ وَاصْطَفِيهِ تَفَاخُرًا إِنَّ الْقَرِينَ إِلَى الْمُقَارَنِ يُنْسَبُ. Choose your friend wisely. And then when you choose him, hold great pride in the fact that you chose such a righteous person as a friend, because you will be associated to that person. The friends that you keep, the friends that your children keep, will be the people that they will eventually become in the future. So if you are around bad company, you should make an effort to stay away from that company. You should choose to have righteous friends, because they will have an impact on you. And there's a famous hadith, we all know it, the example of a person who goes and visits a person who sells, utur, a person who sells, a merchant of perfumes. When you go to him, you're either going to buy something and end up smelling good for later on, or at least because of you going in the store and trying on the samples, you're going to be impacted by that and you're going to smell good leaving it. Versus going to a blacksmith, either he'll burn your clothes or you're going to start smelling like coals. That's how bad friends are or should be perceived, that they are detrimental to your future. They're detrimental to you. So you should not associate yourself with bad friends. You should not associate yourself with bad company. And it's an elephant in the room. But many of our children, because of the bad company they keep, you know what they end up doing? I'll tell you what they end up doing. I've seen this myself. And we cannot hide from this reality. They start vaping. They start getting into drugs. First they'll start vaping, then they start getting into things that are even worse than that. Then they go and they level up into marijuana, for example. And then they go to crack and cocaine. That's what they do. I've seen it. It's not far and distant like you're thinking, oh my God, what is Shaykh talking about? It's in front of us. We hide from it, but it's true and it's existent. It's our own kids. It's our own youth. So we need to make sure that the company we keep. I know many Muslim brothers that were very righteous. As soon as they went to college, they joined a fraternity. You know what happened to that brother? Now every weekend he goes out and drinks. Every weekend he goes out and parties with girls. Every weekend crack cocaine. Sometimes going to Vegas. This is haram. Like imagine the lifestyle he's living now. It could have been avoided if he just did not join that company, that bad company, because they led him down the wrong path. One thing at a time, one thing at a time, one thing at a time, until his whole future was wasted away because of the bad company he kept. And there's also another thing, the company that we keep, the social interactions we have with the opposite gender. Islam is very strict and very clear cut when it comes to interactions with the opposite gender. It should be for haja. It should be for haja. When you have a school project, that's a haja. When you have something important that you need to discuss, straight, clear cut, to the point, whether you're at work or at school, clear cut your interactions with the opposite gender. They're not lengthy and they're not for no purpose. Girls and boys, they cannot become friends. Mustahil. Men and women cannot be friends of that nature. Men can have camaraderie and companionship with men. Women can have friendship with women. But the ties between them, they have to be of acquaintanceship. They have to be formal. Men and women interactions, they have to be formal. Otherwise, it's going to lead down another dark path of possibly leading to zina. And that's one of the major kaba'ir. That's one of the sins that if a person commits, if it was in a Muslim society and people saw him, he would be whipped. So it is a major sin, and we need to make sure that our children do not have interactions with the opposite gender. And it's become very common in schools for guys and girls to be friends, but that is not the case. That should not be how a Muslim lives. Because right now, it doesn't seem like a big deal, but later on, it's going to be very detrimental to that person's future when he wants to get married. He's going to have a past of how many haram things he's done. It's going to linger on. These things do not just disappear. Yes, they can disappear by you doing tawbah, but they still have the impact on you. Tawbah does not mean that those sins do not have an impact on you. A person who spends his entire youth buying and selling drugs, he gets jailed. As soon as he gets into jail, he's sentenced for 20 years of his life. He performs tawbah immediately as he got into jail. Was his life still impacted or no? It was. His life was impacted. So the worldly impacts will still reside, even though your slate might be clear with Allah Azza wa Jal. And even still, you could have been in a much better situation than if you were to not have done that in the first place. Tawbah is not something that it's not our get out of jail free card. It's something that we should not hope to do, like, I'm just going to do tawbah later. No, we should avoid it at all costs. And that can be done simply by avoiding the bad company when you're young. So, avoid bad company. And that also means the people that you allow in your life, and not just the people you allow in your life, but everything else, the stuff that you consume. What type of music do your children listen to? What type of music do you listen to? Is it constantly cussing, talking about drugs, talking about women, talking about all of these haram things? Do you know that your children are listening to these things? What is in their headphones? Do you give your children open access to internet where they're able to access the internet and see whatever they want to see, and then you don't even know what they're seeing? God knows what they're watching. Do you know what your children consume from social media content, these devices? They might have opportunity for a lot of khair, but there is a lot of shar in them. And let me tell you, the people behind these softwares and the people that are involved in trying to cause addiction, because there are people that they hire, these big companies, they literally hire people to see how can we get people to be. There's no such thing as a free product. If you think this is a free product, that's wrong. You become the product. You become the product, right? So they find ways to pull you in, and so they'll do it darajatan. You'll find that first they introduce you to this, you're like, oh, haram. And the next time it's a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. They have people hired in their big companies in order to have this happen. And so our children, they'll be on TikTok scrolling, and you don't know what they're watching. So we need to make sure that we limit all of these and remove all of these things from their lives, because it is better for them. They might be resistant in the beginning, but we need to make sure that we cut off these wasa'il for shaitan to ruin and impact their lives and destroy their lives. And so, again, avoiding the bad company is one aspect, but they should also have an effort to make good company, because a person cannot be, just not social at all, where they have no friends whatsoever. Avoiding bad company is one aspect of it, and another aspect of it is that you make sure that your children are always surrounded around good company. And that means that you bring them to places where you know good company will be. You do things that aren't in the betterment of your children. You do things that are in the betterment of your children. You have house parties, for example, where you invite other families, like-minded families, where you know that their children are growing up in a righteous household, where they are innocent, where they are not introduced to these things. You make an effort to make your children as best as you can in righteous homes. You make, not just righteous homes, righteous companionship. You make sure that you make an effort, not just as for parents, but even for children, to make sure that the friends that they are around are good people. And so those are the 2 points that I wanted to discuss. And the last thing is just an encouragement of some sort for the year to come in seeking knowledge. The Prophet ﷺ, he says, طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ مُسْلِمٍ. Seeking knowledge is compulsory on every single Muslim. Seeking knowledge is fard. So I'm going to split that up into 2 categories. Worldly knowledge, religious knowledge. Just for the sake of this lecture. Not as if they are split up, but just for the sake of the points I'm going to bring up. Worldly knowledge and religious knowledge. We need to make sure that our children are working hard and rigorously towards their worldly knowledge, towards their secular studies. Because we cannot have Muslims that are ill-equipped to deal with the society. We need to have Muslims representing us in all different areas, in different fields. We need to have Muslims representing us in politics, Muslim doctors, Muslim engineers, Muslims in all fields, so that we have representation, proper Islamic representation in all of these things. And so the scholars, when discussing worldly knowledge, they consider a fard kifaya and a communal obligation. Every community needs a doctor, every community needs an engineer, so make sure that your children are geared towards working hard in school. They're not the ones sitting in the back, they have their hat on backwards, their pants are sagging, they never take notebooks to school, they don't have pencils. That's not how students should be. Sad to say, this is what we are seeing now, because the school systems are failing our children. Let's be real. Many of the school systems, not all, but many of the school systems are failing our children. But we need to be proactive. We need to be proactive in making sure that our children are separate from the rest, and that they stand out, and that they are excelling in their studies, in their secular studies. And the second part is the religious studies. We cannot just have our children focus on secular studies. You know what happens then? They might become successful in their careers, but they forget their religion. They might be successful in their career, but he never prays, he never fasts, he doesn't read Quran, he has no connection to the masjid. He's going to end up getting into marriage and then getting divorced because he has nothing that is tying him down. He's going to live a life, maybe successful in his career, maybe making money, but for what objective? So even the objective of working and learning secular knowledge should be that I'm going to benefit my community. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed me with this. I'm going to give back to my community in whatever capacity possible. That is the intention that a person has when he's studying these secular sciences or entering into these different fields, that he has the intention that, Ya Allah, I'm doing this so that I can benefit my community. I can benefit the Muslims at large in America. And then similarly, you have to make sure that our children are invested in learning Islam. How many hours do they spend learning secular studies? 8 hours, maybe more. Then they come back home, they do homework, they have tests. And then later on in college, they're spending more hours. In high school, they're spending more hours. Then they get into work. How much time are they dedicating to learning Islam? Islam is not something, mashallah, patty cake, everyone, mashallah, just come, you learn qaida, you know how to read, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ, and then that's it, you go home. That's not Islam. That's not the depth of our religion. Our religion, if you look at the texts that are written, within the different sciences of Islam, requires decades and decades of someone to just invest of their own life for mastery of these subjects. So we cannot have very, surface level knowledge of our religion. Pray 5 times a day, fast in Ramadan. That's not enough. We need to make sure that we are invested in our religious education. This is not just for our children, but even for adults. Because let's not pretend like the adults are at such a high level of knowledge. Seeking knowledge is not just an obligation. The Prophet ﷺ didn't say طَلَبُ الْعِلْمِ فَرِيضَةٌ عَلَى كُلِّ صَغِيرٍ. Seeking knowledge is an obligation on every small child. He says obligation upon every Muslim. That includes people that are 60 years old. That includes people that are 70, 80, 90 years old, that you have to continue studying and you have to continue being a student at some capacity, at some sort, that you are always increasing the learning of Islam. And it could be another discussion as to how can I study Islam. The ulama have placed pathways to make it easier for people to study Islam. There are many different sciences, and every science, there's beginner text, there's intermediate level text, there's mastery level text. Most people live their lives not even going over the beginner level texts. Can you imagine someone doesn't even have any idea what hadith is? They live their entire life as a Muslim, they don't know what a hadith is. They live their entire life, they don't even know what Surah Al-Fatiha means. They live their entire life, they don't even know what's going to happen at the Day of Judgment, what they're going to be asked about. They live their entire lives not knowing these basic things that every Muslim, this is fard ayn. The thing that I'm talking about, the basic fundamentals, this is fard ayn. Every Muslim has to know it. Secular knowledge, I said it was fard kifaya, a communal obligation. One person has to do it out of the community, so the obligation is not present. But for this, every single person has to do it. Woman, man, girl, boy, young, old, does not matter. This is a religious obligation upon every single Muslim to know the bare minimum fundamentals and basic beliefs of their Islam. And we need to invest ourselves and our children into these things. Just as we invest ourselves into our careers, into secular studies, we must invest the same amount of effort into our religious education. And so I end that, inshallah. I don't want to get too long, even though I could. But so just to highlight the points again. Number one, we need to make sure that our children are praying, because this is the first thing that they will be asked about. Are they praying at school? Are they in good company? Because their company can either lead them in a good path or a bad path. And last but not least, seeking knowledge and the importance of seeking knowledge and being rigorous and hardworking in your studies. Not to be complacent and lazy, rather to be hardworking. And this can be said hundreds of times, but we need to make sure that we apply this, inshallah. And I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us from those that establish prayer, to make us from those that are good company themselves and are in the good company of others, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala teaches us beneficial knowledge that we are able to implement. Wa sallallahu ala nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum. Barakallahu feekum. Ameen. Jazakallah khair.